following podcast contains spoilers and words like gee, whiz, and gosh damn it. We watch TV. We watch TV. Hello everybody and welcome back to We Watched a Thing. I'm very excited for this week, and firstly let me apologise if my voice is a little bit crackly. The man flu got hold of me and will not let go, as it tends to do. But I'm very excited to be here chatting with great friend of the show, DT from Space Castle once again. How you doing, mate?
Dude, I'm great, man. Sorry you're a little fluish. I am a little coldish, I guess. I've got a little nose and throat thing going on, so you're in good company. We're going to get through this together, man.
I'm looking forward to it. And this is our first time. You've been on the show twice before, both times doing new releases. And this time I reached out to you and I said, you know what? Pick one of your favourite films. I know that you have incredible taste in film. You are a great guy to chat film with. Correct me if I'm wrong, you've got a film degree, is that right?
I actually don't. I went to film school, but I got to a point where I had a choice where I could move to LA and continue my film career or not move to LA and be a happier person. And I decided not to move to LA. So I actually didn't finish film school, but I did have a blast doing it. I learned a lot, and it's made me into a rather insufferable film snob. So, yeah.
I've worked with film crew all over the world, and very few of them have finished film school. It seems to be a trait that I can track. Most people who are really good at working in the industry never actually finished. So
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
Yeah. But so, you came back to me with a list of a few movies that we hadn't done on the show before. And this one really, really jumped out at me because, I mean, who doesn't love this movie?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Terminator 2 and your relationship with it and why you chose this one. And first, let me ask you this, because I think we're around the same age. Do you remember if you saw this or the first Terminator first?
I think I saw this one first, honestly, because this was more of, I don't want to say family friendly, but a little bit more approachable for me, being like, I think it was 8 when this movie came out. Yeah. And the Terminator, the original one, is kind of scary. It's more of like a sci-fi horror thriller than this one, which is more of like a sci-fi action thriller. Yeah. So it was definitely one where I grew up watching Terminator 2 and kind of discovered the Terminator a little bit later, like towards the end of like grade school, let's say, just because I wasn't quite ready for it. I was kind of a wussy when it came to horror movies when I was a kid. So
Yeah, definitely. I see this franchise very similar to the Alien franchise, where it starts with really much more of a horror movie, and then the sequel is, as you say, much more of an action. So, I mean, have you always loved this movie?
Always, man. Yeah. Yeah, I was 8 years old, and like this was like peak 90s filmmaking. It's just insane. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, let's get into it then. Terminator 2 Judgment Day is a 1991 American science fiction action film produced and directed by James Cameron, who co-wrote the script with William Wisher. It stars, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, Robert Patrick, and Edward Furlong. And what is it about, DT?
Terminator 2 Judgment Day is about how you should never trust Los Angeles police officers. I'm kidding. It's a continuation of the first film, which was a smash hit, and they felt a lot of pressure to come up with a follow-up to it. And it's about the continuing saga of Sarah Connor, who becomes pregnant with the inevitable, destined leader of the resistance of humanity, who has to do battle with the robots of the 80s who have come sentient and have basically destroyed most of humanity. And her struggles to keep her son alive because he's supposed to save the world. And doing battle with robots and all kinds of 80s fashion and 90s fashion, and Guns N' Roses being on the soundtrack.
Yeah, this is perfect timing for me, actually, because just in the last month, I did a guest spot over on the wonderful Movie Reviews in 20Qs podcast talking the first Terminator. And I mentioned when I did that I almost didn't bother even rewatching it, because it's a film that I've seen so many times that I was like, I can do this. And I threw it on just to kind of refresh myself and got hooked, because I love that film. I made the big call on that episode that I personally feel like Terminator is a better film than Terminator 2. But I have to say, after rewatching this one, I'm correcting myself. I'm a sack of shit. I lied. I think it's truly just recency bias. And for me, it's just whichever one of these two I've watched latest, that's the one that I'm loving that day, because I think they're both just exceptionally good films.
I think so too. I think they're separate but equal too. Like you said before, it's very much parallel to the Alien franchise. And it's interesting because James Cameron kind of did the same thing with both franchises, where the first film was like a small, intimate, intense sci-fi horror movie. And the second one, James Cameron just kind of blew it wide open and expanded the universe and turned it into like a full-on just bombastic action movie.
Yeah.
So I love the first Terminator movie for the fact that it's small and intimate and scary and weird. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is just terrifying in it.
Yeah,
and I love
so good.
T2 Judgment Day because it's just that quintessential, massive, gigantic, everything's getting set on fire and blown up 90s action movie. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the shooting of the film took place over 6 months in Los Angeles and thereabouts, and naturally it went way over schedule. And the production was super rushed and super rocky. They had a lot of issues repurchasing the rights back from the people that James Cameron sold it to make the first movie.
Yeah,
I think he sold the script and the rights for like $1 just to get it made, and then there was a big dispute over who owned the rights and how to get it back. They were able to purchase the rights because he and Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a massive proponent for this film and trying to get it made, he went out and he negotiated just as hard as James Cameron did to get the rights back to make this movie. And they ended up purchasing the rights for somewhere between like $15 and $20 million.
Yeah,
which sounds like a lot of money until you saw the returns when this movie became the third highest grossing movie of all time at that point. So really good wheeling and dealing. But the production was super rushed. It was really rocky. They planned out all of like the pre-viz stuff and all like the vehicle chases with James Cameron literally just filming like toy cars on tables and then sending that footage over to like the storyboard artist just to get it done. And they didn't have a whole lot of time to like test out a lot of the practical effects on set and whatnot. They had to just shoot it. And if it didn't work, they cut that out of the movie or they shot around it and edited it out. Like, it was for as being as big and bombastic and huge and expensive, because it was like the most expensive movie of all time at that point. And it was kind of shot super guerrilla style, really. Yeah. It's kind of punk rock how this movie was made, which is rad. Yeah.
I know it's crazy that this is an independent film, and you're right. The figure I read was 17 million for the rights because
that sounds right.
I think that the rights were split. The original studio in some of them, and also Cameron's ex-wife, who had co-written the Terminator with him, owned a share of the rights as well. So they had to purchase from both of them.
Yeah,
and so when they did that, Cameron didn't even have a storyline in mind. It was much more Arnie who really wanted to push this thing. And so
they had like 7 weeks to write the script. I think it was super quick.
And it's insane because this is. Look, I mean, I think that there's definitely a narrative around that Cameron is a much better director than he is a writer, and I think that's true. I think his dialogue is not always the strongest.
Sure,
but I think narrative and story-wise and pacing, this is an incredible screenplay. Like I said it about a month ago when I watched the first Terminator, that I was shocked at how short that film was. I didn't realize that film was only like an hour 40. Like in my head, that's a plus 2 hour film. But the pacing is amazing. And then I had the exact opposite experience when I put this one on yesterday and I saw that it was 2 hours, 17 minutes. And I was like, I can't believe this is that long.
Yeah. I actually had that exact same reaction when I rewatched it for prepping for this, where I always imagined T2 being super short, like 90 minutes.
Yes.
And then I put it on and like the runtime comes on when you stream it. It's like, this is 2 hours and 20 minutes? Really?
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like it when you watch it. It's so brisk. It's
the pacing is insane. 11 minutes into the film, we have met all of our main characters and the story has been fully established. And I'm not really usually much of an action movie guy. Like I'm much more into dramas. What I like about this film is more the thriller side of things. But that action sequence, which is effectively the last hour of the movie, from the moment they go to Miles' house and then from there go to Cyberdyne and then the steel mill, it's like a full hour-long action sequence that just never lets up and never stops. And the pacing of it is so incredible. You just... Oh, fuck, I love this movie.
I do too, man. And there's some bat shit. I forget, can I curse on this show? You can bleep it out later.
Of course you can,
yeah. There is some bat shit stuff involved with the shooting of that entire sequence too, because they go down to Mexico and they arm up and Sarah takes off and she goes to Miles Dyson's house, the guy who's responsible for all the research and development that eventually leads into Cyberdyne and Skynet being created. She goes to assassinate him to try and stop everything from happening. She has a change of heart. They team up with Miles Dyson, who realizes the error of his ways as a scientist, all of his hubris and whatnot. He's like, I was just doing this because it was like super cool. Like we found a robot arm and a microchip and we're going to make some really rad stuff out of it. And he's like, oh, I end up killing 3 billion people. All right, let's go take care of this. And they do that and they storm the Cyberdyne building. There's this just massive all-out war between Sarah Connor and the Terminator and like the entire like Los Angeles Police Department and all the special units. And there's just some wild stuff that happens. Like the subsequent chase when they get out of the Cyberdyne building and the T-1000 is chasing them in the helicopter. There's that shot of the helicopter going underneath the freeway overpass.
Yeah.
And it's hysterical if you listen to the commentary about James Cameron, because he's like, you see that helicopter going into that highway overpass? That's a helicopter going underneath a highway overpass.
Yeah.
And they decided they were going to do this shot. And the pilot who actually performed the maneuver, they did it twice, which is insane. And I'll explain why.
Wow.
The pilot who performed the maneuver is actually the guy who was in the helicopter when the T-1000 like oozes through the windshield, and he's like, "Get out." That's the pilot who did this.
Yeah.
And he actually flew that helicopter underneath that freeway overpass at 70 miles an hour. And the film crew was so adamantly against it, and they were so afraid something was going to go terribly wrong that they refused to take part.
Yeah.
So Cameron grabbed the camera, got into a car, and shot the thing twice himself.
Man.
Yeah. Like I said, like this thing, for being as big as it is, it was like totally punk rock and like guerrilla filmmaking. It's great.
Yeah. That's crazy. And I think you can really feel that. Like the amount of practical effects in this film are insane. Like it shouldn't sound shocking because this is a film from 1991. Like this is literally a 31-year-old film. Like visual effects were, all practical at this point really. And yet when I read this number today, so this film has a 137-minute runtime, and there are 5 minutes of CG in the entire film. Now,
which was unprecedented at the time.
It is unprecedented, and yet when you watch this film, that number sounds insanely low because this is non-stop action. Like virtually the only visual effects, as far as I know of, are the T-1000, the liquid metal, and like. I mean, okay, sure. Would a kid watching this movie today think that looks insanely realistic? Probably not. But I tell you what, they hold up pretty fucking good for 1991.
They really do, man. I mean, Dennis Muir and ILM, they knocked it out of the park. And then they went on to do Jurassic Park just 2 years later. Like, absolute height of their game. Just insane.
Yes. Oh, Jurassic Park, I think, is still the height of visual effects. I don't think that we've ever topped it. And I think that so much of that is due to that blend of, robotics, practical effects, CGI. It's because the blend is what makes everything so real. And
exactly.
I think that that's what worked with this film as well. Like, you watch some of these sequences and it's shocking. Like when Linda Hamilton is having that vision of that nuclear fallout at the playground, and that was all done with miniatures. And they had studied like how a nuclear bomb explodes and like what the path of the fallout would be and everything. And like the care taken in sequences like that is absolutely insane.
Cameron is meticulous, especially when it comes to details. Like he understands and he gets that type of stuff, and anything he doesn't understand, he fully researches to like an obsessive degree. There's little hints of that throughout this movie. Like the T-1000 is flying the helicopter chasing, Sarah Connor, John Connor, and the T-800 in the truck.
Yeah.
And while he's piloting this helicopter, he's actually like shooting a machine gun and reloading it.
Yes.
And there's only certain angles and clips where we can see they added like a third arm coming out of the T-1000 stomach to pilot it. Like who would think to do that?
Yeah.
Or like when they're storming the Cyberdyne building, the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, he's got a bandolier full of like smoke grenades, like a grenade launcher, and you don't notice it at first, but he flings all the grenades to his back because he's going to go walk out into a group of cops who are going to shoot at him, and he doesn't want to blow himself up. He doesn't want to blow the cops up either because he's been ordered by John not to kill anybody.
Yeah,
this movie is just, for as rushed and crazy and intense and over the top and just bonkers as it is, the attention to detail is just staggering. And that's just how James Cameron's mind works, man.
Absolutely. I think that, this is the height and the peak of his like creativity, I think. And like, as like an aspiring writer and everything, I think this film is incredible. Like the narrative that this film takes, and for him to write it in 7 weeks or something is insane. Like even just that simple turn of having the T-800 be the good guy now, like it's a really, really smart choice. Like, because from a narrative point of view, Linda Hamilton is terrified of this thing. Like she's feared this thing forever, and now she has to learn to, like, I guess, team up with it.
Yeah.
It's just so smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And it shouldn't work as well as it does. Like you take like the villain of the previous movie and you make him
Yeah.
Not quite cuddly, but sort of sympathetic. And his bond with John Connor is a little cheesy at times, but still heartfelt. But overall, it works for some reason. I think mostly due to the charm of Arnold Schwarzenegger as a character.
Yeah.
He is just so good in this movie at marrying like the robotic awkwardness of being a robotic killing machine, and also sort of inquisitive and likable because he's just this stone-faced action star. It just works for some reason. It just works.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, let's talk actors then. I mean, obviously, Schwarzenegger, the Terminator is easily, for me, his best character, both in the first film and in this, which are both entirely different characters. I think it's the best acting work he has ever done. And
what about my boy, Mr. Freeze, though?
Nice to see you.
I fully agree. This is some of his best work by far. Yeah.
Yeah. And Linda Hamilton, I mean, she goes above and beyond in this movie. Like, again, the turn of character for her between the first movie and this.
Yes.
And, I was reading that before they even started writing, Cameron and his co-writer just sat down and rewatched the first Terminator and thought about how long it had been since and where would these characters be now. And, I mean, it's such a realistic choice. Like, if you knew what the future was and you knew that the future was this destruction and death of the entire planet, you would effectively go insane. Like,
totally.
And she is a badass in this film.
She absolutely transforms, and it's amazing. From, like you said, like her turn of the character from being like this meek and passive and terrified character in the first movie to just being this determined and clever and just fierce protector of a woman is just staggering. And Hamilton is fantastic throughout this entire movie. She is just a dynamo.
Yeah, yeah. Now, obviously, this film relies pretty heavily on a child actor as well. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't always go well. Where are you on Edward Furlong in this film?
I think we've seen better child actors, but we've also seen way, way worse.
Yeah.
For the fact that this was his introduction and it's this huge, massive, high-profile action movie, I think he was really good in the movie. Yeah. And I think his comedic timing was really solid, too. He had a really great rapport with Arnold, especially.
Yeah, I agree. I think what really, really makes this film work is the relationship and the chemistry between the three of them. Mm-hmm. And you're right, I think the chemistry between him and Arnold in particular is really good. But I also think that Furlong is pretty good in those scenes with Linda Hamilton, where he's meant to portray that kind of sadness about how his life has ended up due to his mother. And I think he does pretty well. Like you said, I don't think it's the best performance we've ever seen, but I think a lot of that actually does come down to the dialogue. Like, this is a very 91 film. There's a lot of like, yo, dude.
Hasta la vista, baby. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, it's kind of cheesy, but I think it works. And I think that he actually does a pretty good job in this film.
I agree. Yeah. It's impressive what he was able to pull off, or Cameron was able to pull out of him too, as being a child actor. I think Furlong was great. I really do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would give him like a solid B+, A-.
Yeah.
I
agree with what you said there. I think you're right. I think the performance of a child actor really is dependent on the director and what the director is able to pull out of them. That's right. This came up when I was talking about Firestarter, and you can see it with, using that as an example, Drew Barrymore's performance in E.T., where she's got Spielberg pulling this performance out of her, and then like less than a year later in Firestarter, where she's quite frankly not very good.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it comes down to the director, and Cameron, I mean, he's, regardless what you think of him, the man can direct a film.
He's masterful. Absolutely. He's a maestro. Yeah. Let's talk about Robert Patrick, because Robert Patrick is just the man in this movie as the cold, calculating, just predator of a Terminator, the T-1000.
Yes.
So speaking of Predator, he based all of his movements when he was training for the movie on a shark. And when you go back and you watch, you can totally see that, the way he just kind of moves and kind of slithers around and slinks. And it's very, very cool. And he's terrifying. He never blinks in a movie.
Yep.
He's always just moving very smoothly and very calculated. And that voice and that icy stare, like you just fully buy into him being just this horror villain. And he's just great.
Absolutely. I mean, I love Robert Patrick. I don't know. Are you an X-Files fan at all?
I actually wasn't until like film school. So I never watched it as a kid, and then like a bunch of my friends were into it. I was like, all right, I'll try this out, and I actually ended up enjoying quite a bit of it. Yeah,
yeah. Because I'm a massive fan, and I seem to be the one person in the world who sees Robert Patrick, and I just think Agent Doggett. Where everyone else is like, what are you talking about? He's the T-1000. Like, but I mean, this is the performance of his lifetime. Like, he is exceptionally good in this role. And it's a role that it's easy to look at a performance like this and think, oh, that's easy to do. Like, you know, he barely has to talk. But it's extremely difficult. Like,
yeah, he did a lot of physical training for that. Like, just focusing on his movements. Yeah. And he ran and jogged and sprinted a lot to be able to look like menacing when he was running. Funny story. He was actually, to the point where they started filming, he was actually able to outrun John Connor's dirt bike. Yeah. So that scene where John Connor's leaving the mall on this dirt bike, like they had to slow down Robert Patrick and shoot it differently because he was able to like catch up to the bike in no time because he was just sprinting all the time. Yeah.
I mean, the way he runs just displays such character. Like as an animator, and I'm sure that you feel this as a designer yourself, like there is so much in a walk cycle or a run cycle. Like you can portray so much about a character just in the way that they move. And that run with those arms out front, and when they, you know, that scene, that iconic scene where he's chasing down the car and those like big metal poles come out of his arms. Like it's so brilliant.
That's awesome. We narrowly missed that performance. Do you know who James Cameron's original choice for the T-1000 was?
I don't. I know that his original idea was to have two Arnies fighting each other, was to have both T-800s. But no, I don't know who the original 1000 was.
His original choice to play the T-1000 was Billy Idol. No joke.
Wow.
And it was all set to go, and Billy Idol got into a motorcycle accident and couldn't do it in time for shooting. So they had to recast, and they found Robert Patrick.
That's insane. The only Billy Idol performance I think I've seen is in The Wedding Singer. I don't think of him as an actor.
No. But I just can't imagine, first of all, Billy Idol in a cop uniform. That alone is just bizarre. Yeah. But how Billy Idol would have portrayed the character and like his movements and like the menacing aspects of it, it's hard to imagine. But I'm super thankful we got Robert Patrick the way we did. Thankfully, Billy Idol recovered from that motorcycle accident. He's obviously doing fine.
Yep, he was in The Wedding.
But man, Robert Patrick just turned out to be one of the most iconic like Hollywood villains of all time. Like the T-1000 is just absolute action movie icon at this point.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Can we talk score for a minute here?
Absolutely.
Because this is hands down one of the greatest scores in the history of cinema. Like the way that it builds on the original Terminator score, which is already excellent. Mm-hmm. But to add in that melody and have it work so well for every emotion that these characters are feeling. Like it's it's insane.
Yeah, Brad Fiedel did an amazing job with the first Terminator, and it's very 80s, that soundtrack. A lot of instrument sampling, a lot of synth, but like you said, he takes what he had from the original film and he expounds upon it. Yeah. And what he was able to do, taking the small sort of scary soundtrack of the first Terminator and turning it into a more bombastic, like horns and trumpets and everything going off, is just an achievement. And at no point does it feel dated, which is weird because it's all synth and like samples. But it still really works. And the sense of tension, like you said, it's just amazing. Yeah.
I was just going to say that because, you know, you brought up how kind of 80s the first score is. This is timeless. Like, I still listen to this soundtrack today. Like, it's just, it's an achievement. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's really good.
It's so memorable as well. Like, there are a lot of scores that really work for what they're doing on screen, but you couldn't hum them afterwards.
A lot of Marvel movies.
You could hear just the first three notes of this score, and you know what it is instantly. It's like Jurassic Park. It's just iconic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the sound design for this movie in general is just absolutely bonkers. It ended up winning the Oscar for best sound effects editing and best sound that year, and for good reason because they put an absolute F ton of work into this movie. Yeah. First of all, if you notice going back and watching it, you and I are both film buffs. We can see when things aren't quite right. And the one thing that's not quite right about this movie is the fact that like over 70% of the dialogue is ADR. It had to go back and be looped over because of how loud and bombastic and crazy and all over the place the actual shooting was. So most of the live recording of the dialogue was just worthless. So they went back and actually I think that kind of helps Edward Furlong's performance a little bit too.
Yeah.
I think his line delivery, being able to go back and do multiple takes and change things up and add emphasis when needed, I think that really helped the performance too.
Yeah.
But 70% of the movie's dialogue is looped over. And the only movie I can think of off the top of my head that did just as much, if not more, ADR is the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Yeah. Because the motors in the turtles' heads were so loud that they had to go back and redub all the human actors' dialogue because it was just drowned out.
Oh man, I used to be such a fan of that movie. We should do that together at some point.
Let's do it, man. That's still one of my favorite movies of all time.
Same.
We might do an episode of that of A Real Drunk, our YouTube series. If we do that, we'll have
fantastic.
you on.
Mate, for sure.
Yeah,
Let me ask you this: who's your favorite turtle?
Raphael.
No
hesitation, no question. Raphael.
Yeah, right. I was always Leonardo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hotly debated amongst us over in Space Castle because I'm a Raphael guy, Alex is Leonardo, and Seth is Donatello. And we ended up getting not drunk, but inebriated to an enthusiastic degree. One of our favorite breweries back in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're like, you guys realize like we are our favorite Ninja Turtles. Like, I'm like the surly, like sarcastic one, and Alex is like the stoic leader, and Seth is always building stuff and learning things and tinkering, and we had a really good laugh over that. But yeah, but Terminator 2 sound design, like I said, they won multiple Oscars for it.
Yeah,
Cameron was very meticulous in that too, as far as sound design, where all the guns are bigger than life.
Yeah,
and in many cases they would shoot, and then they would go back and they'd replace the gun sounds with bigger and more powerful weapons. Yeah, so like Arnold's shotgun is actually like cannon fire, like no joke, cannon fire. And like the T-1000's pistol, they're in that back hallway in the mall. It's like it doesn't have a silencer, but it sounds like ultra silence, but also loud at the same time. Yeah, it's just super hyper realistic. And for sound systems coming up at the time they did, it was like Terminator 2 and like Jurassic Park were the two movies that came out that really kind of pushed the demand for really good sound quality in theaters. Yeah. And rightfully so. And thankfully, because the sound of this movie is just fantastic. It's really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's funny you mention all that because as an Australian, I have zero idea what guns sound like. Like, I just don't know. But
I'm an American. I hear them every day. I'm kidding.
But like, yeah, they do come across as larger than life in this film. So that's really interesting to know that they were replaced with bigger weapons. That makes sense.
Yeah. And what's cool is like, I don't know if it's cool, but it's very interesting is the entire sequence of Sarah Connor busting out of the whatever the name of the mental institution is. Yeah. From the time she like unlocks the door and runs out to the point where they get to the elevator and they take off, they didn't record live sound at all. Yeah, it's all completely dead, and they replaced everything. They filled everything in with ADR and Foley and music. So the actual footage when they shot it is dead silent. It's super wild. Wow. You would never guess. It's brilliant.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's just super cool. Yeah. This whole movie is just like, it's little movie magic. Like it's everything about this movie is just like wizards at the height of their craft. It's fantastic.
I mean, absolutely. Like I'm sure that you're the same. This movie is part of the reason I am who I am. Like it's movies like this and Jurassic Park, and then later in my life, more indie movies like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Like that's why movies like this are why I'm doing what I'm doing today. Like it's Let's talk the franchise then.
Okay. Do we have to? It ended with this movie, didn't it?
Well, that's why I'm curious.
There was just the 2 movies and it's over.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know if you've seen all the rest of them. I haven't. I've only seen the third one and then the most recent one, Dark Fate. Where are you on the rest of the franchise? Do you wish that they had just stopped here?
I do wish that. I have never watched the Sarah Connor Chronicles, a TV series, but I've heard good things.
Yeah, that's actually very good.
Yeah, I never saw that, but I did see, for better or worse, all of the other subsequent movies because I was such a huge fan of the franchise growing up. Yeah. Rise of the Machines, Terminator 3 has some interesting things to say, but it mostly treads water, and the ending I just ended up hating. Yeah. I think Terminator Salvation is the most interesting and probably the most noble failure of all of them. Yeah. I know people think Sam Worthington was really flat and whatnot. I liked Christian Bale as John Connor. I fully just wanted, since I was a little kid, just a movie of nothing but the future war. And that's as close as I'm ever going to get. And that scene with the big hunter-killer robot thing at the gas station is still like an all-time action scene. It's really well shot. Overall, I don't really love it. I haven't really revisited it in probably 10 years.
Yeah.
Genesis and Dark Fate. I think the world would be a better place if they were never made. And I say that as a huge Linda Hamilton fan, and the novelty of seeing her come back for Dark Fate was really fun, but the movie was just abysmal. Yeah. And the less said about Terminator Genesis with Jai Courtney and Emilia Clarke, the better. Just an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I agree. I was always so disappointed because I'm with you. I would love a sequel that's just the war, because I think the whole thing about I don't know about you, but watching this film, I always felt like, well, a sequel's inevitable because they can't change fate. Like, it's an interesting concept to me that the whole kind of message of this movie is about being able to change fate, and we can do this stuff when we all know before the movie even starts that they can't, because if at any point they do, John Connor just disappears off the face of the earth, right? Like, it's predestination. Like, everything has to happen exactly the way it does. Otherwise, he never sends Kyle Reese back. He's never born. Like, everything has to go exactly the way that... So, yeah, I always wanted to kind of see that play out.
That would have been an interesting ending. And if they ever do decide they're going to make the last and final Terminator movie, that is something they should probably do, or everything just gets irrevocably erased. Like, none of this ever happens because they've gone back and fixed it so it doesn't. Time travel in movies is very difficult and very confusing and wishy-washy. And this is one of those franchises, and there are some that I refuse to do so, where I just kind of like brush away the inconsistencies with the time travel just for the sake of enjoying the movies because they are so good in and of what they are.
Yeah. See, I actually don't feel like there are inconsistencies. Like I said, to me, I feel like it all works as long as you accept that they can't change fate. Like, if you just accept that everything is going to happen exactly as it has, and no matter what they do, it's going to play out the same, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the alternate deleted ending for Terminator 2?
I did just recently. It was about 2 or 3 weeks ago I saw it. But remind me what it is.
Well, we know at the end of the theatrical cut, the Terminator goes in lava and does the really awful, terrible thumbs up. And then you just see the long stretch of highway, and like the end of the first movie with the Sarah Connor voiceover. Yeah. There's an alternate cut, and you can find it on YouTube really easily, where it's 30 years in the future, and John Connor is now a U.S. senator.
Right.
And Sarah Connor's lived to be, the ripe old age of 60, whatever. And they're in a park playing with John Connor's daughter. And she's doing this voiceover about how, they stopped Judgment Day, they saved the world. She wanted to go running through the streets screaming about how she saved everybody and everything's going to be great and how everybody should cherish every day. Instead, she just got drunk and stayed by herself. And one of the last lines in the movie is the fact that she still is haunted by the potential inevitability of that quote unquote dark future still coming true.
Yeah.
So she's still haunted by the idea that at any point time could diverge or something could happen in the past and everything could just be erased.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I like the finality of T2 as the end of the franchise. And that's how Cameron and Wisher actually wrote it. But I love the idea that fate is always changing and you think you may have changed things forever and everything might be good. And in the blink of an eye, something might go horribly wrong, or things might go back to the way they were before. The way they were before, and there's no way of going back and changing that. I like the super cautious optimism of how Terminator 2 ends.
Yeah,
and I don't think they should have gone forward with the franchise at that point. I think it was too much of a good thing. And the diminishing returns on the subsequent movies was just not worth watering down the franchise as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I was going to ask you just now. Like, do you think that there is another franchise that's a better example of diminishing returns in terms of like
Star Wars? Sorry, everybody.
I don't think you have to apologize for that. I feel like that's a pretty popular opinion right now, surely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Maybe Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I think that's the other one that pops into my mind. I think Alien is another one that, again, plays out very similar to this.
I'm one of the weirdos that likes Aliens 3, and I dislike everything afterwards.
See, I'm one of the weirdos that likes Prometheus.
Really? You are a weirdo. Good Lord. Prometheus had some interesting things to say, but it never came together as like a cohesive, solid film for me. Yeah. It just felt like Ridley Scott just kind of noodling, which is fine. I'm a fan of jazz. I dig it. I understand what he was doing, but it just didn't feel necessary. It felt very self-indulgent and non-committal. Like his entire thing was like, yeah, it's a prequel to Alien, but it's also not a prequel to Alien. And yeah, that's kind of a xenomorph, but it's actually not a xenomorph and so forth. Yeah. And it's like, what are you saying here? Really? Yeah. Like, yeah. Why are you showing this to me if there's no actual point? If you can't tell me what the point is and you're saying there is no point, why'd you make it aside from money?
That's fair enough. Let me ask you this, because we've spent a lot of time talking about what a fantastic director James Cameron is, and I stand by that. Are you a fan of Avatar, and are you excited for Avatar 2, 3, 4, 5?
Can we talk about Titanic instead?
I love Titanic.
I do too, man.
Oh, man, I think it's one of the best films ever made.
Avatar is interesting in that it was another one of those big Cameron-driven leaps in technology.
Yes,
much like the Star Wars prequels were, in terms of like what George Lucas was able to do with like Jar Jar Binks. Yep. Whether or not Jar Jar Binks is something you like or not, you can't deny the fact that that leap in technology was massively influential and very important to filmmaking.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't think Avatar really had anything interesting or unique to say. I mean, we saw it in Dances with Wolves. We saw it in Last of the Mohicans. We saw it in Pocahontas. Oh my God, Ferngully is like the number one culprit. Or actually, Avatar is the number one culprit for ripping off Ferngully. Absolutely. Yeah. I saw Avatar once in theaters. And then I tried to watch it again when it was out on, I think it was like DVD or maybe streaming on Netflix at some point. And I couldn't get through it. Yeah. I couldn't get through it. It was a slog. I'm never, ever going to not bet on James Cameron because the man just prints money. I'm sure there's going to be something of value in there, and I certainly hope there is because he's been making it for like 12 years.
Yeah.
But I can't muster up the courage to be like, I'm going to go see Avatar 2 like opening weekend. Yeah. I'll check it out when it's available for like home streaming, and I'll take it for what it is there. I'm not going in expecting to be disappointed. I'm not going in expecting to be blown away by it either. I think it just will be what it will be. But I do think it's going to make like $7 billion at the box office because it's James Cameron. It's just it's magic.
Yeah. I mean, going back to this film, I think that you nailed it just there when you said it's kind of that leap in technology. And I think that unfortunately Cameron is a director who really succumbed to that. And I don't actually think it's for the better. Like when you look at what makes this film so magic, like we've just spent the last half hour talking about, it's the gorilla-ness of this film. It's the all those practical elements and everything that just work so well together, and that focus on storytelling dictating what effects may be needed rather than thinking, oh, technology has gone here. How can I write a story that will let me do this? Which, Yeah,
I think one of Cameron's strengths as a director, aside from the obvious, because he is a masterful filmmaker, is the fact that he surrounds himself with really smart people who also know how to make movies very, very well. Yeah. He got the best in the business to do the special effects. He got amazing editors to tell him this is really self-indulgent and dumb, leave this out. Yeah. Unfortunately, he didn't listen to Linda Hamilton when she said the thumbs up was really dumb. He left it in. But Terminator 2, I can see just from the deleted scenes in the director's cut, the theatrical cut has no fat on it whatsoever.
Yeah.
The deleted scenes and the director's cut are a little chubby. They're a little sluggish. And I think Cameron is somebody who makes really good movies because he has people around him to tell him when something is just too much or self-indulgent and needs to be trimmed back. Avatar, I feel like you said, is just unchained James Cameron doing whatever James Cameron wanted to do.
Yeah.
And the fact that he has now had like over a decade to work on the sequel now, I think it's just going to be the most James Cameron movie you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's going to be like amazing and fantastic or if it's just going to be a self-indulgent slog. I don't know.
Yeah. One last unrelated tangent. I'm sorry to keep going on. But another film that we've now both established we both love, Titanic. Yeah. What's the worst ending? The thumbs up in this or the heart of the ocean being thrown over the side by the old lady?
Oh, that's tough. I'm gonna say the heart of the ocean being thrown over the edge, it pisses me off every time. Just because like the Terminator, like there's no reason for him to do the thumbs up. There's nothing established prior to the movie that would. It's like a throwback to anything. It's just.
Yeah, it's not like it's something that John Connor taught him to do or anything. Yeah, which that would have been cool. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. It's a weird send off for the character because he's still a killing machine.
Yeah,
but the thumbs up just comes out of left field, but it's inconsequential. It's done and over with. Whereas, Rose throwing the heart of the ocean into the sea after those guys had spent so much time and money and listened to that whole story as she told it. For her to just F them over like that is just sadistic. It's yeah. If I was Bill Paxton, I would have thrown her over the edge too.
I mean, speaking of the alternate endings, have you seen the alternate ending to that one where Bill Paxton and the old lady dance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bizarre. Again, James Cameron just like having no filter.
Yeah. All right. So back to this wonderful film. How are you scoring Terminator 2 Judgment Day? Do you consider this to be a perfect film?
No, it's not a perfect film. It's really, really good. And for what it is, it's still at the height of its genre. And, it's timeless. It's fantastic. I very, very rarely ever give a movie like a perfect score. Last film I really thought was perfect. And what I would just unhesitantly give a perfect score is Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh,
and I loved your episode on that because you hit on everything I love about that movie, and I was just completely blown away.
Yeah, easily the best film I've seen since I've started the show. Easily the best film I've seen.
Unbelievable. I cried like no joke. I cried like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah,
and not like tearing up. I'm like, I need to get up and pause this and grab some tissues because I'm a wreck right now. Like, yeah. But as far as Terminator 2, I would give it like a solid like 8.5. Or maybe like a 9 because for what it is still the pinnacle and it's still the benchmark and it's fantastic, but it's not perfect.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm a 9 out of 10. I think that this is, probably the peak of the action thriller genre. I don't think that we've done better than this, and I don't think that we ever will probably. At least for my tastes, because I feel like action thriller as a genre has now veered so much from what it was that I just don't think we'll ever get this sense of fun again in a film like this.
Yeah, like the Fast and Furious movies, I think, are the movies that try the hardest to reach that. But I have a weird relationship with the Fast and Furious franchise because I love the first 3 movies for very different reasons. Sorry to go off on another tangent once again, Billy. I apologize.
No, I love chatting to you. I'll chat all day about whatever.
The first movie is a legitimately good action movie. It's fun. Like the cars are great. Vin Diesel and Paul Walker are a blast, and it's just a really well-made movie. The second one is so batshit crazy and so over the top and so cartoonish that you cannot help fall in love with it because it's just so damn charming. Like Tyrese is just an absolute blast in that movie.
Yeah.
And I love Tokyo Drift because it goes right back to the roots of the franchise and it just tells a small, intimate, fun story with really cool Japanese drifter cars, and it's just great.
Yeah.
4 and 5 go a little bit more bombastic, and they kind of fall into that sort of Terminator 2 sort of line of thinking where you went from that small intimate story into like this big gigantic world globe trotting, everything's exploding type of thing.
Yeah.
And then you get to Fast and Furious 6 and everything just falls apart and becomes an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
But my point is that there's an earnestness and a genuineness to Terminator 2. And we've lost that in action movies and they all feel really, really cynical.
Definitely.
And the Fast and Furious movies are the closest that have come in terms of that sort of feel, but they've become massively cynical and just unenjoyable as well. So.
That's true. And I think that the big difference for me is that this is a film, and this is my favorite kind of film, is a film that is insanely entertaining, but you still feel like it actually has a point to it and an artistry to it and something to say. Like, this film, it touches on a lot of different themes, which you might not even think of while you're watching it because you're having so much fun, but it's all about humanity and peace and fate and, all these different things. And that's something that, as fun as a movie like Fast and Furious is, I just don't know if it's ever kind of touched a real theme like that for me.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, man, thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell everybody where they can find Space Castle and Real Drunk, which is insane fun, and
thank you,
just everything that you guys do?
Yeah, so I'm one of 3 people who host Space Castle. Comes out every Wednesday. It is on literally every single podcast player you can think of, and you can find us on social media at Space Castle Pod. and spacecastlepodcast.com. Real Drunk you can find on our YouTube channel. We don't have enough subscribers yet to have a custom URL for YouTube. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Everybody go subscribe. But if you do a search for Space Castle on YouTube, you'll be able to find that series. And what we're doing on Real Drunk is we are watching classic movies, both good and bad, and we're devising drinking games that we write ourselves. And then we videotape ourselves performing those drinking games while watching the movie and cracking jokes. Yeah. And so far, we're up to 5 episodes, and the reception has been fantastic, and we're having an absolute blast doing it. Not so much the next morning, but the night of, we're just going full bore and having a great time. So yeah, come check us out and come hang out. Absolutely. We'd love to have you.
Highly recommended, both the show and the YouTube series. I mean, they're both just heaps of fun. You're super professional as well. Like you sound good. Your video work is amazing on Real Drunk. It's really cool stuff.
Thank you, man.
I don't know how you film it so well when you're so smashed, but
we make sure we're sober before we press record. Yeah. And sometimes we just let the camera go until the battery goes out and we all go to sleep while we're drunk. And we don't worry about it till the next day when it's time to edit and clean up and, make ourselves coherent.
Well, definitely check it out. Thanks again for joining me. Next week, I will be getting to Jurassic World Dominion with John from The Pint. And the week after, I'm really excited. I'm going to be checking out the new Alex Garland film Men with a friend of the show, Sean Carney. Because Men has already come out in the States, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
Have you got to it yet?
I have not had a chance yet. No, I was out in California for a week and work deadlines. I'm a little bit behind on my theater going, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'm really looking forward to that one. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, you can do that at wewatchedathing.com or wewatchedathing@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the handle at wewatchedathing. If you want to help support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/wewatchedathing, and I'll catch you next week. You're still here? The show's over. Go home. Go. But if you can't get enough of We Watched a Thing, why don't you check out our Patreon page? There's tons of behind-the-scenes content, heaps of bonus episodes. You can get full, unedited videos of each episode recording. You can pick a movie for me to do on the show, or even come and join me while I talk about it. So why don't you head over to patreon.com/wewatchedathing. Go watch a movie.